What does the serpent eat in Genesis 3:14? So in Genesis 3:14, a lot of people believe that the serpent is actually an animal, and that Genesis 3:14 is this punishment on this animal and not a punishment on Satan. I don't believe that there's an animal at all in Genesis chapter 3, period. Satan doesn't possess a serpent. He doesn't go in and convince a serpent. A serpent doesn't act on its own. No, in fact, the serpent is Satan. It's just Satan, nobody else. Even Revelation has this idea that it's it says the serpent of old, Satan. The Satan and the serpent should be identified as the very same being. If that's the case, then what does Genesis 3:14 mean? So it says, "Cursed are you above all the beasts of the field." And everyone thinks that that's a reference to the serpent being a beast of the field. But I think it's exactly the opposite. For one, if he was a beast of the field, it should have said in Genesis 3:1 that the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field. Now, for some of you, you're going to be reading your ESV like a good Reformed or Calvinist, and you're going to say, it does say any other beast of the field. But that's not how it's translated in Hebrew. The word other is just added in there because they think that the serpent is a beast of the field. But no, instead it just says the serpent is more crafty than any beast of the field. And your grammar Nazis will know that this is implying that the serpent is not a beast of the field. And there's a lot more. I plan to do a video on Satan all by itself and how this fits into the narrative. But in short, it's Satan that we're talking about in Genesis 3:14. Most people agree that it's Satan we're talking about in 3:15. So my question for you is, if it's him in 3:15, why isn't it him in 3:14? So, he's cursed above all the beasts of the field. I think the first thing that's being talked about here is the idea that he is lower now. His status is going to be lower than the animals. He once held a high status, and now he will have a low status. And it says, on your belly you will go all the days of your life, you will eat dust. The first part of this is simply saying that he is to be humiliated. You know, these are expressions to be understood. You know, it's the idea of abject humiliation. On your belly you will go, crawling around, all of these ideas. It's just like in modern English. We might say so-and-so is the scum of the earth. Are we really saying that that's what they are ontologically? They're this little piece of scum and they're of the earth? No, we're not saying that at all. So I think we need to understand a little bit of the idioms and hyperbole and stuff that's going on here. But then the last part is really, really interesting because it says, and you will eat dust all the days of your life. And so most people thought well, that's resonant with snakes. They just slither on the ground and they probably scoop up dust accidentally or something like that. But man is actually called dust in Genesis 3:19. God says to Adam, for you are dust. Present tense, for you are dust. And you will return to the ground. So it's from dust you are to dust you will return, right? And this is right at the end of this whole punishment saga and all the bad stuff that's going on. It really suggests that if you just read this together, the serpent will eat dust, man is dust. So then doesn't that mean that the serpent will eat man all the days of his life? And I think it is. It's very much implying this connection between man and dust. And so it's this idea that the serpent is now going to begin to dominate all that he devours, and he's going to begin to dominate man. Michael Heiser has said it. This is the serpent is to be the god of the dead. And without going into that too much, I think that he's correct by and large. And it's this idea that man, Adam, and all who are underneath Adam, the old covenant, they are now represented by the covenant of death. What once was a covenant of life, that God has promised them, hey, you're going to be my representatives. I've created you in my image, and I bless you to be fruitful and multiply and to go all over the entire earth. And I've provided you with food and land and all of these things. But now man has violated God's covenant. And now all who are under Adam are under a covenant of death. And so now all those who are under the covenant of death, the serpent is going to seek to devour, and he's going to rule over them. You know, in Genesis chapter 1, it says God creates mankind in his image to rule over and have dominion over the earth. And after they fall, the dominion shifts, it seems. That now the serpent is beginning to rule over the dead and have dominion over the dead. Because God repeats this promise of be fruitful and multiply to Noah in Genesis chapter 9. But oddly enough, God omits this little thing of have dominion and rule over the earth. And that is very suggestive of the reason is because dominion has now gone over to the enemy. And the enemy is possessing some of this dominion over the lands. And then lastly, of course, we see this when Jesus is challenged by Satan in the wilderness. Satan offers him all the kingdoms of the world. And Jesus turns them down. But what Jesus doesn't do is he doesn't rebuke him for offering him the kingdoms of the world, for offering something that he didn't control or possess. No, instead, he just keeps on, quotes in the Bible, and says, nope, not yet. I'm not following you. I'm not bowing down to you. I'm not doing any of those things. For Jesus was going to legitimately regain the kingdoms and dominion. So all who are under Adam are under the serpent's dominion until the seed of the woman comes along and sets us free. So the serpent, he's Satan, and he seeks to devour men. And this is exactly what Peter says. And I think it's 1 Peter 5:8, right? The devil is as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. He is out there to try and devour God's children and God's people. And this is actually what we see immediately. Genesis chapter 4. Cain and Abel. And God even says to Cain, hey, behold, sin's desire is for you, but you must rule over it. Now, some people have said that in the Hebrew, the way that it should be interpreted, like sin is crouching at your door and you must rule over it. And some of the Hebrew scholars have actually said it's not sin who is crouching at the door. It's the crouching one whose desire is to devour Cain. And I think actually this is what Peter is quoting essentially. This is what he has in mind, is Genesis 4:7, when he's talking about this in 1 Peter 5:8. He's thinking of exactly this. And many commentators all note that it's like, yeah, the crouching one, it's like a lion who is crouching down, ready to prey on its victims. And ultimately, we know what happens. Cain is devoured. He is devoured by Satan. He does lose, and he becomes a child, a seed of the serpent, as he is devoured by the serpent. And so this is the narrative that we see, that the Bible is telling this one consistent story about the devil trying to devour mankind, devour God's children. But there fortunately was one who was able to conquer and overcome. And when Jesus came, he crushed the head of the serpent. So all of us can be free and liberated and out from underneath of the dominion and control of Satan when we submit ourselves to Christ and allow him to do the work in our lives.